So back in the 80s and early 90s, video games were seen more as toys or gimmicks rather than anything more serious. You could make video games based off films that were rated R, and there was no age rating system to say that anybody under a certain age can't play the game. You have games like Predator and Alien, both based on rated R flicks that are now made as games for kids to play. All of this came to a forefront when this little game came out. One of the big names that come out of the 90s fighting game boom was Mortal Kombat. It stood out from the crowd. These weren't animated characters fighting each other, they were real actors performing these moves on screen. The sound effects were attention-grabbing. And on top of all this, you can kill the opponent in this game. While Mortal Kombat isn't the first game to ever feature death or someone being murdered, this is the first time where the violence in a video game was being presented in such a gladiatorial-like manner. Every character gets a unique animation that kills off the opponent. Nobody else was doing this at the time. This was so outlandish that the game helped create the ESRB rating system, which, much like the game series itself, is still going on. With each new generation of consoles, better hardware gets created, which means the consoles will have better graphics and better processing power, which means that the fatalities get more bombastic as the series goes on. So I'm going to rank the fatalities from the rosters of each game to figure out which character on average has the best fatalities. Except we have a few issues. For starters, there's a lot of fucking characters. There are dozens of characters across these games, all with a few fatalities per game, so I'm going to have to cut back on the characters we rank. I do intend on making a second part to this video, but that will be after Mortal Kombat 1 is done adding in new characters. Another issue is that doing fatalities in most of the games is fairly tough. Nowadays in the newer games, they let you practice the fatalities in their own practice mode, and they're much more streamlined. Usually in the newer games, the fatality is just movement inputs, then an attack or block. Back then, the fatalities were the Wild West. There were no rules. The manual didn't even tell you how to do it. You had to figure it out and write it down yourself. A good portion of them are simple, but sometimes you have to hold down a certain button throughout the input, then let go. Another way you have to hold down a certain button for 30 seconds, then do the input. Some had not only the code, but another sequence tacked onto it. Plus, not only that, the knowledge on how to do the older fatalities is not as clear-cut as the newer entries. I was juggling several websites around just to find each of the right codes. Now, I tried getting all the fatalities on my own accord to give myself a nice little history lesson on the games themselves and to get my own footage. Sadly, some of these fatalities just escaped me, and I couldn't perform them. Some of them have been grabbed online, but I will give credit to the original creators of the video. Again, my apologies, but dear god, some of these fatalities are insane. I give huge props to anyone who was around for the series start and was able to figure out the fatalities on their own. Lastly, each of the eras have a few fatalities that make it harder to rank in the way I'm going to, due to some of the fatalities getting reused, and the mere existence of Triborg in Mortal Kombat X. I'll go over the problems with the fatalities when I get to them, but I just want to let everyone know that this system isn't 100% perfect in that regard, but we should probably look at how I'm going to be ranking the fatalities in the first place. I'm going to be ranking the fatalities on a scale from 1 to 10, and I'm going to average out the scores at the end of the video. We're going to look at as many unique fatalities as possible, so if a fatality gets reused in one era and looks practically the same as another game, I won't include it in the final ranking of the video. In terms of reviewing the animations themselves, we're going to look at the fatalities and rank them based on how well they fit the character, if they use the character's abilities properly, and of course, the overall quality of the animation. We're also going to be separating the games into 3 categories: the 2D era, the 3D era, and the NetherRealm Studios era, or NRS for short. The reason being is that these animations play out much differently in each of the eras. Earlier games were much simpler, while the newer games feel as long as a Scorsese movie. The list of characters I'll be ranking will be as follows: Baraka, Cyrax, Ermac, Jade, Jax, Johnny Cage, Cabal, Kano, Katana, Kung Lao, Liu Kang, Melina, Noob Saibot, Raiden, Reptile, Scorpion, Sector, Shang Tsung, Sindel, Smoke, Sonya Blade, and Sub-Zero. I'm sorry if this list is missing your favorite character. I promise there will be a second video to come out, but it might be a long time before that will happen. But before we get into the video, could you hit that subscribe button for me? It'd be pretty cool. The original run of Mortal Kombat was when the game was taken at its most serious. There's nothing goofy about the game at this state. Okay, maybe the games weren't that serious to begin with, but objectively the games are taken the most serious at this stage. While it's true that the games are getting banned in countries today, it's hard to say it's taken more seriously now, when back in the 90s, it legit helped create the ESRB. This is when the games were at their most charming. There's no microtransactions, there's no story mode, and there's barely even a story to begin with. It's just characters fighting each other. They've been adding more story-driven content since the 3D era onward, but these games are at their most bare bones. So with enough stalling, Ah, the game that started it all. I mean, would you look at all this intense gore that isn't found anywhere else? Yeah, the game is cute nowadays. There are other games with pixel graphics that are creepier, but you have to remember that this wasn't done. Everything we're seeing was unique for the time, and it still is neat nowadays. Sure, there are other fighting games where you can kill the opponent, but none make it as fun as Mortal Kombat. With only a handful of characters and one fatality each, it was quite easy to go through this game. Up first we have Johnny Cage, whose fatality is him punching your opponent's head off. Very simple for our first one, but I do like it. It is a very quick move, blink and you miss it kind of deal, but pretty good for our first showing. 6 out of 10. Kano is next, and his fatality is ripping out the opponent's heart. Another fairly simple and standard fatality, but still good. 7 out of 10. Liu Kang's fatality is a simple cartwheel and uppercut. While the move itself is fine, did you notice that the screen didn't go dark while the fatality went off? Liu Kang in this part of the lore, to my knowledge, doesn't like violence or killing people, so you'd think it'd be good for that. But that doesn't make sense since the game says fatality, which implies that the character died. So at the end, you just get left with a shitty fatality. 2 out of 10. Sonya's fatality has her blowing the opponent a kiss that leaves nothing but their skeleton. Another good fatality for the time. 7 out of 10. Sub-Zero's fatality is one of the most iconic in the game's history. He removes the head and spine of the opponent. If you think about the game's first fatalities, this is the one that popped in your head. Not only that, it has some unique gore in it, which is always great to see in these older games. I know it doesn't really use Sub-Zero's powers, but you can't beat something that is this iconic. 10 out of 10. Radiant's fatality is him using his electric powers and exploding the enemy's head. Pretty good fatality, and also a good use of his powers. 7 out of 10. Scorpion pulls off his mask revealing a skull, and he spits a fireball at the enemy. This is the most insane out of all the fatalities in this game, since no other character really has such a shift in their fatality. Him pulling off the mask is so surprising, because before that, you would have assumed Scorpion was just a dude, making you wonder more about him. This fatality is amazing. Best in show. 10 out of 10. Mortal Kombat is the most charming out of the original games. The fatalities are simple, yet feel like a relic from many years ago. It set up the series for success with the animations, since people wanted to see them done and figure out how to do them. All of the characters here are mainstays of the series, with them only missing out on a few games each. On to the next game. Coming out just a year later, we have a sequel that has most of the original cast returning, along with a bunch of newcomers that would all become mainstays in the series franchise. We have characters that have more monster-like designs like Baraka and Mileena, and we have the villain in the first game, Shang Tsung, being playable, and we finally have the boy! Yeah, I know Reptile was in the first game as a secret, but this is our first time playing as the best character in the series. I won't be taking questions on that. He turns into a lizard, that's cool. That's enough for me to want to play him. This is the start of the series having 2 fatalities per character. Not every game would have 2, but most of them do. So let's get into it. For our first fatality, Liu Kang turns himself into a dragon and eats the enemy in half. What a glow up from the first game, the dude just ate the other guy, and this was after he was about peace in the first game. 10 out of 10. His second fatality is the same as the first game, so it won't be counted again. Kung Lao's first fatality is him throwing his hat at the enemy and decapitating them. While this is quite tricky to pull off, it's still neat to see it get performed. Makes you really feel like you earned the decapitation at the end of the round. 8 out of 10. His second fatality is much simpler to pull off but looks much better. He slices the enemy's body down the middle and lets it split into 2. Such a good fatality. It has unique gore and looks great too. 9 out of 10. Johnny Cage's first fatality is him ripping off the opponent's upper half and throwing it behind him. What really sells it is the actor's face giving it all he has as he throws the opponent's upper half behind him. 7 out of 10. Johnny Cage's second fatality is the same as before, but this time there's an added benefit of punching their head off 3 times. Still not going to count it in for the video, but it's still neat to do. For our first fatality, Reptile rips off his mask and eats the head of the opponent. Amazing fatality. Not only that, he rubs his belly because he had a good meal. 8 out of 10. Reptile's second fatality is a bit more complicated. It's almost like a brutality in the new games. You make him go invisible and he rips the opponent's body in half. Another great one that isn't as hard to pull off as some of the other fatalities in this game that require a bit more effort. 8 out of 10. Sub-Zero's fatality has him freeze the opponent with a blast, and the second part has him walking toward them and punching them. Good use with the ice powers and has some unique gore to boot. 8 out of 10. His second fatality is a bit more strange. He throws an ice ball at them, which causes them to explode. They don't freeze, they just explode. Very strange fatality. 5 out of 10. Shang Tsung's first fatality is him sucking the opponent's soul right out of their body, leaving it as only goop and a skeleton. Some unique gore along with good animation. 9 out of 10. His second fatality is him flying into the enemy's body and having them explode. While I do prefer the first one, I will say having him inflate and explode was cool to see. 7 out of 10. Shang Tsung is one of the few characters to get a third fatality, and not only that, it's unique as well. Shang Tsung turns into Kentaro and punches the enemy in half. A pretty good fatality that shows off what Shang Tsung is able to do. 7 out of 10. Kitana's first fatality is just a standard decapitation, nothing mind-blowing about it. 5 out of 10. Kitana's second fatality is a bit more unique. Sort of like the Sonya fatality of the last game, Kitana kisses the enemy and they grow fat and explode. A strange fatality, but a fun one nonetheless. 7 out of 10. Jax rips the opponent's arms off with the first fatality, and the opponent just stands there. While I do like it for being unique, the opponent doesn't die like you'd think they would. They just stand there. It's safe to assume that they would bleed out, but it's possible to survive this. 6 out of 10. His second fatality has him clapping his hands around the enemy's head. I like it a bit more even if it is a bit more standard. 7 out of 10. Melina, in her first fatality, has her stabbing the enemy several times in the stomach with her sais. An alright fatality. 6 out of 10. Her second fatality is much better. She gives them a kiss and sucks them into her mouth and spits them out as bones. I vastly prefer this one. Dude, how wacky and outlandish it is. 8 out of 10. Baraka uses his arm blade to decapitate his opponent. It kinda sucks how cool Baraka is as a design, and see how basic this fatality was. 5 out of 10. His second fatality is much better, picking his opponent right up by the blades and letting them slowly die while he stares at them right in the eyes. Very good. 8 out of 10. Scorpion has the same skull fatality as the first game, but with some much better animation. Still, I won't count it for the video. Though I'm a fan of his other fatality. He uses his spear to slice the neck and body in half. For some reason, I always loved how one roll of blood comes out across the screen. Always loved that visual. 8 out of 10. Raiden's fatality is him grabbing the opponent's body and exploding it. The neat thing about this fatality is that you have to mash the buttons while you're electrocuting the opponent, otherwise they just fall limp. Still a good fatality. 8 out of 10. His second fatality explodes the enemy after an uppercut. On one hand, it's just another uppercut fatality, but on the other, the entire punch was enough to explode the enemy's body. 8 out of 10. This game had a lot of good fatalities in it. Sadly, some characters had some that got reused, but there's still some good to be had here. Liu Kang's unique fatality was actually great in this game. Scorpion and Sub-Zero had some good ones, and Kung Lao and Shang Tsung brought some good ones to the table. On to the next game. And here we start having issues. For starters, the character select screen. It lasts 2 seconds long, making it difficult to pick the person you want to play as. Not only that, this roster is missing some of the best characters in the series. I'm assuming it was because people were complaining that the ninjas in the game were just palette swaps, but their solution to that was add cyborgs that are palette swaps. I mean, I love the cyborgs, don't get me wrong, but they didn't need to remove Scorpion. And they did my boy Sub-Zero dirty by changing his design to look like that. I could complain about the roster more, but we have a whole slew of new fatalities to look through. Smoke makes his first appearance in this game, and is my favorite design of him. Human Smoke is cool, but Cyborg Smoke goes so hard. His fatality is him shooting bombs onto the stage and destroying the planet. Like, damn, the rest of humanity didn't have anything to do with the fight, but Smoke doesn't care. He's taking everyone down with him. 10 out of 10. His second fatality is also funny. He forces a bomb down the enemy's throat as if he's Ted Kaczynski, and he causes them to explode. The opening of the character's mouth is so goofy looking to me. 8 out of 10. Shang Tsung's first fatality has him grabbing their body and laying them down on a bed of spikes. An alright fatality, but it doesn't really do much with the character. 5 out of 10. His second fatality is much better, having him lift their body in the air and turning them into goop. Much better. 8 out of 10. Sindel's first fatality has her wrapping her hair around them and spinning the opponent until body parts are flying off. A good fatality for this character. 7 out of 10. I'm much more of a fan of her second fatality. She screams at the enemy so loud that all that's left of them is just bones and meat. Great fatality. 9 out of 10. Jax's first fatality is him turning his arms into blades and slicing the enemy into pieces. Such a weird fatality because to my knowledge, he doesn't have any moves in the series where he just turns his arms into blades. This feels like it was made for Baraka, but it got made for Jax last second. 4 out of 10. His second fatality is just so wacky and off the wall. He turns into a giant and steps on the enemy. This has been done by other characters, but the reason it doesn't make sense here is that Jax is just a normal dude. He just turns into a giant and kills the enemy. 7 out of 10. Kano's first fatality is him grabbing the skeleton of the enemy and pulling it right out of their body, along with a goofy graphic of the enemy's skin just laying there. It's a pretty cool fatality that goes with his first one where he rips your heart out. 7 out of 10. His second one is a bit more standard. He shoots a laser at the enemy until they explode. Nothing too fancy here. 6 out of 10. Liu Kang's first fatality has him going invisible and setting the opponent on fire. Now I don't know if he teleported into their body to perform it, or if he did something while he turned invisible, but it's still a cool fatality. 7 out of 10. His second one is much more goofy but iconic. He just drops an arcade cabinet on top of the enemy. It doesn't even make sense in the context of the game itself. It's like if someone dropped an arcade cabinet of your life on top of you. What does it even mean? 10 out of 10. Sonya's first fatality is the same as her first, so it's not going to be ranked. Her second fatality isn't too much different than the first. She just blows another kiss at the enemy and just encases them in a bubble. Nothing special. 5 out of 10. Sub-Zero's first fatality is him holding the opponent above himself and ripping the body in half. A nice use for his ice powers. 6 out of 10. I prefer his second fatality though, where he blows ice breath on the enemy and just lets the body fall over, smashing all over the place. Much better than the first showing, just letting gravity do the work. 8 out of 10. Cyrax's first fatality has him flying upward with his wire dreads, and he slices the enemy down like it's a helicopter. I really dig it. It shows that he's a machine capable of doing crazy stuff. 8 out of 10. His second fatality is also great. He puts in a code and self-destructs, not even caring for his own life in the process. 8 out of 10. Sector's first fatality has him crushing the enemy with his human crushing machine that he keeps buried in his body in case of emergencies. I really like this one. It's really quick and devastating. 8 out of 10. Sadly, his second fatality isn't as great. He shoots some flames at the enemy and has them burn up. It's not a bad fatality, it's just not as unique as Cyrax's or Smoke's fatalities. 6 out of 10. Kung Lao's first fatality has him throwing his hat at the opponent and having it slice the enemy. It's fine, but it lacks the impact that his previous fatalities did. 5 out of 10. His second fatality fares a bit better. He spins and brings the opponent in to kill them in his human tornado. Better than the first. 7 out of 10. Cabal's first fatality is he puffs the opponent's head up like they're a balloon and they pop. A bit of a goofy one from Cabal's first appearance. 7 out of 10. His second one is similarly just as strange. He rips off his mask and the ghost of the enemy gets scared and runs away, killing them. Another odd one, but I do like it. 7 out of 10. So Mortal Kombat 3 had some great fatalities, notably with Smoke and Liu Kang. Characters like Sindel and Cyrax also got a chance to shine with a few of theirs. Some are a bit unfocused, but for the most part, these are great fatalities. I hope to keep it up with the next entry. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 is an updated version of the original game. They added some more characters and apparently they fixed the character select screen. While I did have the game, I couldn't perform any of the fatalities on Xbox, and the Steam version is in a disastrous state due to Games for Windows Live existing. I tried hard to get the game to work, but I just couldn't, so I had to pull the fatalities from online. But we do have some new ones to watch, with several characters returning and a few new faces. So even though Kitana wasn't in the last game, her fatalities are exactly the same as her last edition. Her kissing fatality is a little different, but it's still practically the same as her last one, so these aren't going to be counted. They bring peak character back and they only give him one new fatality. I mean, the first one is a little different, but it's way too similar to the other fatality that he has, plus that one is animated better. His second one though is great. I love the fact that he melts as he gets covered in the acid. 8 out of 10. Jade uses her staff and waves the character all around. It's a fairly standard fatality for this character. 6 out of 10. In her second fatality, she just punches the opponent in the air and lets them land on the pole. Nothing special. 5 out of 10. Scorpion is back and he's ready to show you that he still has a skull. Kinda sucks they couldn't think of anything unique for his first fatality, but his second one is much better. He brings the opponent down to Netherrealm and forces a bunch of other scorpions onto them. I really like this one. I like how it cuts to black after all of them gang up on the enemy. 8 out of 10. Melina also returns and has the same fatality as before. Still good, but it's not going to be counted. The second one is quite goofy. She swallows a bottle of nails and spits them at the enemy, killing them. Funny and unique. 7 out of 10. Ermac makes his debut, and using his powers of telekinesis, he slams the enemy up and down on the ground. That's pretty good. 7 out of 10. His second fatality leaves much to be desired. All it is an uppercut that punches the opponent's head off. That's it, nothing unique, and nothing worthwhile. Literally just plagiarism. 1 out of 10. Ninja Sub-Zero makes his return to the series and has one fatality for it. His other form has the same ones, but since this is the same character more or less, I'm going to count it. His fatality is him grabbing the opponent's head and the screen cutting to black. Now I like the fatality, but for some reason it doesn't really fit Sub-Zero to me. I feel like this one will be better suited for Smoke or Noob Saibot. It feels weird that Sub-Zero has this one. 6 out of 10. Smoke's ninja form makes his debut and he has the same fatality as Ermac. 1 out of 10. The fatalities from Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 out of the way, we can look at the fatalities and there was a clear downgrade for a lot of them. The returning characters didn't get too much that was unique and some of them were direct copies of each other. But with that, we have one more Mortal Kombat to go in the 2D era.
Well done.
So most of the fatalities in Mortal Kombat Trilogy are reused from earlier games, but there are a few new ones, which I'm thankful for because my god there's a ton of characters in this game. I had to grab the footage from online again because for some reason DOSBox and this game just wouldn't work properly on my PC. There's only a few new fatalities to go through, which isn't so bad. Johnny Cage has a reused fatality for his uppercut, but the new fatality he has is pretty good. It's a basic backbreaking move on the enemy, but it's still fine. 6 out of 10. Noob Saibot makes his second appearance. His first appearance didn't have any fatalities, but Trilogy has a few fatalities. The first one is alright. The projectile just has them float in the air and spin. It's fine. 6 out of 10. His second one, he picks the enemy up and bounces them on the ground. I feel like it's supposed to be him throwing the enemy into a portal, into another, gaining velocity, kinda like his move in MK9, but the effect looks goofy so it looks like he's just bouncing on the ground like it's a pogo stick. 6 out of 10. Scorpion still has that skull, but his second fatality is amazing. He forms a hand from the ground and slips it down into NetherRealm. It's a very Shinnok-like fatality, and I kinda love it. 10 out of 10. Thankfully, Smoke has two different fatalities in this game to counteract his last showing. One of them, he goes inside the enemy and has them explode. It's an alright fatality, since it does use some of his powers. 6 out of 10. His other fatality is not the best. He just appears from behind and punches their head off. 4 out of 10. Sub-Zero returns one last time in the 2D era with one more fatality. He punches them up into the air and has them land on an ice spike. It's a pretty good fatality that utilizes his powers nicely. 7 out of 10. And with that brings the 2D era to a close. It's very nostalgic for me to be watching all of these again. I remember being young watching all of these on YouTube over and over again. Would explain why I'm a degenerate today, but it was fun reliving the memories and watching these for the first time in forever. But now that that's over, we enter the second phase of the series. The 3D era. The times when the games are taken at their most serious. The games turned into a 3D fighting game franchise with the release of Mortal Kombat 4 and Gold. This wasn't a one-time deal. They committed for several games to be a 3D fighter. It's not a phase mod! These games were the awkward teenage years of Mortal Kombat, when the series had insanely horny character designs, fairly gross-looking graphics, and a ton more stupid moments. Ham from the... But I won't harp on the era too much. This is my first introduction to the series, and it does hold a special place in my heart for that. Yeah, some of the characters they added were just terrible, but they did add some fan favorites into the mix as well, so it wasn't too bad. There's a good amount of stuff to be found in this era with the amount of side modes in it, and we should give the games credits for finally giving the game story modes. But enough about that. We have several new fatalities to perform that need to be ranked. Mortal Kombat 4 and Gold were the first entries into the 3D era, and while yes, these are 3D fighters, they're more 2.5D fighters if you want to say that. While yes, you have an arena to walk around in, it's much more stilted. Other 3D fighters take advantage of being in a 3D environment, but this game is very much fighting someone on a 2D plane. The gameplay is just kinda goofy. This is the first game in the series to give your characters a weapon to play with, which stayed for quite a long time in the series. But we should probably go through with the fatalities, because good lord, the game never looks any more jank than it does now. Cyrax's first fatality is him blowing himself up while killing the enemy. It is a repeat from an older entry, but it is from a new era and it does have a nice graphic of the enemy hitting the screen. 7 out of 10. Cyrax's second fatality has me conflicted. So the first time we see this fatality is from Smoke, which means that this fatality is plagiarism. The problem is with the rest of the fatalities in the series that are references, they come from Cyrax. So I don't know if Cyrax was meant to have this fatality the whole time, or if Cyrax copied Smoke's homework, but I'll give it an 8 out of 10 still. Plagiarism is fun! Melina's first fatality is her throwing several sides out of nowhere into the opponent. It's an alright fatality, but nothing insane like I wanted out of Melina. 5 out of 10. Her second fatality is the exact same thing. Yes, it's a reference to her first appearance, but it would have been better to see anything else. She's got a freaky mouth, use it to eat the opponent. 1 out of 10. Kung Lao's first fatality is just another hat throw, but it does have a nice camera angle and the opponent does stay on their feet for a good second. It's alright, but not boundary pushing. 6 out of 10. Kung Lao's second fatality is another hat toss. Okay, are all the fatalities in this game just going to be left over from the 2D era? Please stop reusing them. I need people to watch my video. 5 out of 10. Baraka's first fatality is another decapitation. 1 out of 10. His second fatality is a fatality from his first appearance with much worse pacing and impact. 1 out of 10. Okay, for some reason, Sonya Blade's first fatality is just the Kiss of Death fatality, but it slices the opponent in half. For some reason, I'm much more about this than the original, mainly because the slice is satisfying to hear and the body has a good ragdoll. 7 out of 10. Her second fatality is... oh my god, it's actually something new that's amazing! Let the church bells ring! And it's a good fatality too. She picks the opponent up and rips them in half with her legs. That's a pretty good one. 8 out of 10. Jax's first fatality is him clapping the enemy's head off, which has a nice sound to it, but I can only watch a guy get his head removed so many times. 3 out of 10. His second fatality is him ripping the opponent's arms off. Now I actually prefer this one to the original rendition, because not only does the character lie down dead, you get the effect of ripping their arms off one at a time, making it last longer, an actual good reason to reuse a fatality. 7 out of 10. Liu Kang's first fatality is him turning himself into a dragon and slamming the opponent's body down. I actually really like this one, since your character actually does toss him around a bit and slams him down on the ground quite nicely. Not as shocking as the original one, but it's still nice to see. 9 out of 10. His second one is also nice. You throw the opponent at the screen and your character throws a fireball at them, causing them to explode. Another good fatality. 7 out of 10. Johnny Cage's fatality is a decapitation. I don't care if there's an effect. 1 out of 10. His second fatality is much better. It's like his second fatality from the first game with a bit more power due to the back break. 6 out of 10. Sub-Zero's first fatality is a spine rip fatality again. It's fine, but nothing special during this time. 7 out of 10. His second fatality, again, is just a reuse of an older fatality. It's not too great since with the 3D they could have done so much more. 4 out of 10. Raiden's first fatality is his second game's fatality in 3D. It has an alright explosion, but nothing spectacular. 6 out of 10. His second fatality is practically the same thing with no explosion. 1 out of 10. Scorpion's first fatality is... okay, I don't care if it's iconic. 1 out of 10. This is like the umpteenth time they've reused this fatality. His second one is literally an animality from the third game. Except this one ain't a penguin. 1 out of 10. I'm just kidding, it's great. He turns himself into a scorpion and rips the enemy in half. Shocking how much better it is than his first. 10 out of 10. Reptile's first fatality is... okay, I have to talk about this. This design is butt ugly. Jesus Christ, he looks gross. I feel like I got a disease looking at him. He looks like an anti-smoking advertisement. He looks like he smells bad.
Motherfucker looked like a Resident Evil 5 campaign extra.
His first fatality is him eating the opponent's face. I like it. It kind of gives him that animalistic nature to him that fits his name. 8 out of 10. His second fatality is goofy as hell. He floats in the air, which to my knowledge is the only time he's able to do this, and he spits acid on the enemy, which is similar to his other fatality, but I feel like this one has much more unique characteristics, such as a camera shift, the fact that the skin flies off of the enemy in pieces, and the camera shot of the body is great too. 8 out of 10. Sector's first fatality is him using his arm flamethrower to burn the enemy. An alright one, that's pretty funny. 6 out of 10. His second fatality is his human crushing machine crushing the enemy. Another reuse, but it's still a good fatality with good pacing. 7 out of 10. It's funny, you could tell they didn't know what to do because they gave Noob Saibot 2 fatalities that are from different characters. His first fatality is Raiko's and his second is Sub-Zero's. His first one is pretty funny. He kicks the opponent's chest and body parts are spinning. A humorous one to say the least. 6 out of 10. His second one is just Sub-Zero's fatality. 1 out of 10. Now you're probably asking, why is him copying Raiko's fatality fine, but not Sub-Zero's? And my answer is, this is my video with my rules, go make your own if you care this much. So that's all the fatalities in gold, and can I say, these kind of sucked. Many of them are reused from past games, which for some of them they did add a little bit of something to them, but these other ones feel so tacked on to the game. I mean shit, Scorpion is proof. They could have given all the characters something cool and outlandish, but most of them were the same as earlier entries. I really hope the next few games have something better, because this was lackluster. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance came out a few years later for the next generation of consoles, and boy does it look like it. Yeah, it's not super pretty, and the characters look like Clay Fighter rejects at some points, but this game was my first Mortal Kombat, and even though I'm dogging on it, it's not terrible. But I will say, I sure am glad I don't have to unlock all the characters in these games. That would be awful. Okay, so I have to unlock several of the characters in order to get this video done. And thankfully this is my first time in the series where the games have a proper story mode. Isn't that exciting? Finally, we get to see what the creators had in store for us all along. You just watch an animation, read a little text box, and play through little tutorial missions. That's it, nothing else. I've heard of some games having overly long tutorials, but this entire game's story mode is a tutorial. Plus, not only that, it's not even a good tutorial. There are times when you have to spill as much blood as you can, and there are other times where you see the opponent do a move that you didn't learn. Also, why do I need a character profile on file? Isn't the fact that I have a game with a memory card enough to save my game progress? I don't understand why people would want this. I can't see anyone getting worried that they have to go through the story mode again because someone played through it. But other than that, this feels like a true jump to 3D. You can actually move around the arena easily. You have moves that attack to the side. And not only that, you have 3 different fighting stances, 2 different poses, and a weapon to use. Pretty fun mechanic. Sure, it's not super in-depth, but being able to switch poses and continue the combo is pretty fun to pull off at a first time playing the game. Only issues, there's no real story to, really practice these moves out on. Okay, ignoring all of that, we have to talk about the actual reason you're watching this video. This is where the fatalities of the series get streamlined. None of them were hard to perform, so I was able to do them with ease. And funnily enough for this game, there's not even a specific area where you have to stand. Even in the newer games I have trouble with it sometimes. Here, you could be anywhere, which to be honest I prefer. And in this game, there's only 1 fatality per character, which kinda sucks for the game, but it makes it easier for me. So let's go! Shang Tsung's first fatality is him lifting the opponent up in the air and slamming them down on the ground. This isn't really anything to do with his sorcery powers, and to be honest feels like an Ermac fatality. The second attack feels out of place and doesn't really relate to the first attack. 4 out of 10. Johnny Cage's fatality is alright. He punches the enemy in the stomach and pulls out the brain. Not insane, but at least Johnny has a unique fatality for once. 6 out of 10. Kano's fatality is him ripping out random body parts out of the opponent, and then he kicks them over. So the first part of the fatality is nothing really special, and the second part is just a basic kick, when it could have been done so much better. 3 out of 10. This really sucks to see, because the fatality was so close to being good. Kung Lao throws his hat at the opponent, and they die immediately. The unique thing is he strolls over to the opponent and kicks the hat out. While I like the swagger Kung Lao has while he walks towards the opponent, it's all awkwardly displayed. Wouldn't it have been so much better if the person was still alive when he attacks him, and then Kung Lao either takes the hat out or punches it out? It would have had a better effect with its pacing. Still, not a bad fatality. 6 out of 10. Kitana's fatality is... Another kiss of death, please think of something new. Jax's fatality has him throwing the opponent behind them and then skull stomps them. It's not too bad. It's simple, but the fact the opponent is left alive at this point leaves a good feeling of suspense. 7 out of 10. Okay, so Sonya's is another kiss of death, but there's a bit more to it. The opponent throws up and then Sonya jumps on them, causing their head to explode. It's awkwardly paced and the move doesn't feel right, making the whole thing feel disjointed. 4 out of 10. Scorpion's fatality is really good. He throws his spear at the opponent's head and tugs it off of them. While it is more of a simple one, it does utilize his moveset in a way that hasn't been done before. Nice one. 9 out of 10. So Raiden's fatality is him grabbing the opponent and electrocuting them until they explode. While it does look nice with the graphics, it's getting harder and harder like Raiden's fatalities, when it's just him exploding the opponent in some way. 3 out of 10. Cyrax grabs the enemy, slams them onto the ground, drags them in, and crushes their entire body. I really like this one. Not only is there much more effort and thought put into this one rather than the others in this game, it also takes use of the fact that he's a cyborg. While Sector needs his human crushing machine to come out of his body, Cyrax keeps it inside of his body, making him much more of a portable cyborg in case if you ever need to crush a human, proving that Cyrax is the better cyborg. 10 out of 10. Okay, I don't care if I get flack. This is peak design. I don't care about this or this or this. I want this. I want Lizard Man back in his full form. I don't care how much it pisses people off. This is peak design. I don't care if I'm objectively wrong. I'd rather be wrong and be me rather than be right and be you. Anyways, his fatality is alright. Bit of a combination of a few of his other fatalities where you just spit on their face and eat the head. It's a bit disjointed, but the unique gore in this game is nice. 6 out of 10. Okay, so Sub-Zero steals Kano's from another game, which sucks, but hey, it's at least better than Kano's in this game. He steals the opponent's skeleton via spine. A pretty fun one to watch. 6 out of 10. And there we have Deadly Alliance, which was an alright game in terms of fatalities. It does suck that this game only has 1 per character and some of them were reused, though that said, some of the unique ones were strong in their own rights. On to the next game. So Deception was the first game in the series to have more of a proper story mode. It's one of the few Mortal Kombat games where you can run around in each of the realms. While it is a goofy story mode, it's just a PNG of hell. It's still fun to run around in it. Only problem is I have to play it. For starters, it's just another long tutorial, with the main difference is that there's a few actual fights. Also, side note, this fighting stance is terrible. One kick and this dude is out of commission. The story mode after a bit is not the best admittedly, but it's still quite fun running around seeing the realms in the games. There's also some side content here such as chess combat and puzzle combat. Man, it sucks seeing these cool side modes where the newer games just have basic modes for their side content. Except there's one problem. For some reason in this game, and this game alone, if you lose, you can input a code to commit a harakiri. Now this isn't so bad, except when I'm trying to get as many fatalities as possible and actually play the game. So when I'm trying to perform the move, the enemy just offs themselves in the middle of it. Either way, there's a whole new slew of characters to play with, and a system that is very similar to Deadly Alliance. 3 fighting poses and a fatality pose at the end. You have to go back to standing at specific spots at the end, but it's still not too bad. Jade's first fatality is her putting her staff through the opponent's head and throwing the body off. An alright fatality with a nice little pose at the end. 7 out of 10. Her second fatality is her slicing the opponent in half and looking back to see if she got the job done. It's okay, not much that could have been done to improve the move. 6 out of 10. Scorpion's first fatality is literally Sub-Zero's fatality. Okay, so out of all the fatalities they could have reused, they reused Sub-Zero's fatality from the first game. That's literally just plagiarism. 1 out of 10. And if you're upset that I gave Cyrax a pass when he plagiarized something, just know that this video sucks. Scorpion's second fatality is a bit stilted. While I do like the fact that he grabs the opponent's arms and legs with his spear, he just breaks their neck at the end, which doesn't really work for this. Would have been better if he removed the head. 6 out of 10. Melina's first fatality is her biting the opponent's head off. I like how they played up how crazy she actually is and bites her head off with no mercy. 7 out of 10. Her second one was so close to being great. She throws her scythes in the air and kicks them at the enemy, which is a good start. But there's no real finish. The enemy just drops dead and that's it. It would have been so much cooler to see her throw another scythe at the opponent's head or just anything. 5 out of 10. Baraka's first fatality is him slicing the enemy's arms, legs, and head off and only grabbing the body. This one is pretty good. It has a good pace and has a good execution and feels powerful. 7 out of 10. His second fatality is at best cute. He punches the opponent's head off and catches it with the arm blade. What makes it cute? The fact that he's so excited about catching it on his blade, as if he's been practicing to show his parents or something. 4 out of 10. But hey, good job Baraka, you made Dad proud. Sub-Zero's first fatality is him freezing the opponent's body, removing the head, and throwing it at the enemy. This one is really good. It uses his powers in a way that hasn't been shown off before. 8 out of 10. His second one is alright. He freezes their leg and sweeps at them and just stomps their head off. I don't know how that works, but either way the attacks do feel connected unlike some of the others we've seen. But something about the pacing feels off, and if he crushed the opponent's head it would have been much better. 6 out of 10. Sintel's first fatality has her screaming several of the opponent's body parts off over a short time. It's okay, but the pacing feels way off for how long it takes. 5 out of 10. Her second fatality is her bringing them into the air and using your weapon as a helicopter blade of sorts. It's actually really unique. It does something a lot of fatalities don't do, which is using the character's weapon for the fatality, which isn't done too often. 7 out of 10. Raiden's first fatality is him exploding both you and the enemy. It does make a little bit of sense in lore since Onaga was in control of him, so it would make sense if Onaga just wanted Raiden gone permanently. 6 out of 10. His second fatality is literally the same thing as the first but without Raiden exploding. 1 out of 10. Cabal kicks the opponent, making them spin, and he pulls out his blade to slice the opponent down the middle. It's fun. I like how the body parts fly off of you while the animation plays out. 7 out of 10. His second one is a bit more simple. He kicks the opponent into the air and slices them in half. While it is okay, the slice does feel really powerful. 7 out of 10. Ermac's first fatality is him slamming the opponent down onto the ground while having the last hit explode the enemy. It's an alright move, but it doesn't really wow me. 5 out of 10. His second one is only a bit better. He lifts the enemy into the air and crushes them, and then he splits the body in half. It's a tiny bit better, but not by much. 6 out of 10. So for some reason, Noob Saibot and Smoke in Mortal Kombat Deception are one character. They share the same health bar and character on the character select screen, and they both only get one fatality of each, which is very strange to me. Noob's fatality is him throwing ninja stars at the enemy until the last hit where he throws several. It's kinda like the fatalities in Mortal Kombat Gold, with a little oomph, but it doesn't really do much for me. 6 out of 10. Smoke's fatality is him going invisible while ripping the opponent's arms off and then punching their head off. This one is really good, utilizes his powers and has a good pacing throughout it too. 8 out of 10. Liu Kang's first fatality is stealing what looks to be some life force from the opponent and then shooting it back at them. It's a pretty good move. I like how the enemy struggles before the hit even comes out, shows some good pacing with it. 7 out of 10. Liu Kang's second fatality doesn't really make sense until you read into why it exists. In lore, Liu Kang was reanimated by Shang Tsung, and Shang Tsung has another fatality earlier in the series that involves him going inside the enemy and exploding them. So it would make a bit of sense that possibly he gave Liu Kang the ability to go into someone's body and rip their head off. 7 out of 10. Deception definitely did have some unique fatalities in it, but some of them felt unfocused. There were fatalities that got reused, which really shouldn't have been the case, and some fatalities definitely did have some pacing issues, but for the most part some of them were fine. But we should move on to the next game in the series. While Mortal Kombat Armageddon doesn't have any unique fatalities and instead opting out for a creative fatality where you do your own moves against the AI, it is nice to see this game exist. So many characters to play as, and I have a lot of good memories playing this game. Is it a good competitive game? I don't care, it's a fun game to play, that's way more important to me. And with a much better story mode than Deception, it's a game that I think is just good to play around in. But we have to talk about the final 3D Mortal Kombat game. What's more shocking is not that Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe is a real game, it's that it's canon. It's far from the first time there's been a crossover game, but this is the first time in Mortal Kombat history where there is one. Everything that happens in this game is set up for the next game. What's worse is that this game is rated T for teen. Yes, there are fatalities in this game for the main cast and some of the DC cast. There's no real violence or gore, it's insanely PG-13 for a game series that has roots of violence in the series. But I can't harp on the game too much. It was the first time in the series where they had this cinematic story mode, which is still being used today in the NRS era, and Ed Boon finally got to work on a DC Universe fighting game soon after this game came out, which is great. So while it is an insane entry to the series, it's still fun to look at. Scorpion is so lucky that I'm not counting this fatality since it's a reused one from this era, otherwise he'd get another 1 out of 10 for it. His second one, however, is actually great. Even outside of the context of this game, it's still really good. He drags the opponent down to Netherrealm and brings them back as a skeleton. That's been a good one for this game. 9 out of 10. Sub-Zero's first fatality is alright outside of this game. He freezes the opponent and they explode, leaving no gore. It's alright and uses Sub-Zero powers in a non-flashy way. 6 out of 10. His second fatality is pretty much the same thing, but I have to give props for him actually killing the enemy. 5 out of 10. Her first fatality is... For the love of God, make a new fatality for Sonya already! Her second fatality is alright. She just snaps the neck of the opponent in a flashy way. 5 out of 10. Shang Tsung's first fatality is him stealing the opponent's soul, which isn't super interesting. He also stomps on the opponent, but it's still not great. 3 out of 10. His second fatality has him turn himself into the opponent and then he kills them. It's the same thing as the first fatality. 1 out of 10. Her first fatality is her just throwing her close fans at the enemy. Nothing insanely impressive about it. 4 out of 10. Her second fatality is another kiss of death. Jax's first fatality is the hand clap on the opponent's head. It's an alright one, it's nice seeing the opponent get their head flattened, but it's a little goofy. 5 out of 10. Jax's second fatality has him punching the enemy in the air and shooting the opponent. It's not great and it's fairly standard, that doesn't really utilize his moveset at all. 4 out of 10. Liu Kang's first fatality is a callback to his 2D era fatality, and the opponent is still alive under the arcade cabinet. He's still moving. How could you call it a fatality when the opponent is still clearly alive? 3 out of 10. His second fatality is frankly really bad. All he does is some basic attacks on the enemy, and he doesn't really do much else. He punches them, kicks them, and throws a fireball at them. No real rhythm or flow. 2 out of 10. Raiden's first fatality is him throwing the opponent in the air and slamming them into the ground. While it's nice that Raiden does something that isn't explode an opponent, it's just passable. 6 out of 10. His second fatality is him turning their body into a skeleton through the power of shocking them a bunch. It's just his explosion fatalities replaced with a skeleton instead for that T rating. 3 out of 10. Kano's first fatality is just the same as Katana's with a little bit more edge. 4 out of 10. Kano's second fatality is contender for one of the worst in the series. He jumps up in the air and then lands on the ground like a dainty little ballerina. It's pathetic, it's legit pitiful, like what even is it supposed to be? He has an eye laser, why not just shoot it at the enemy until they explode into a skeleton? 1 out of 10. Baraka's first fatality is him slicing the enemy and throwing them overhead. It's alright, there's nothing really fancy about it. 5 out of 10. His second fatality is again something simple. He kicks them onto the ground and then stabs them with his arm blades. Again, nothing insane. 5 out of 10. So MK vs DC Universe exists. It did a lot of good for the series, but the main draw of the series definitely did get neutered for the sake of the T rating. Some people look back at it fondly just for the weird fact that it exists, but some people are still bummed out that it didn't have very much content or very many good fatalities. Right after this, Midway shuts down and Mortal Kombat goes under a studio named NetherRealm Studios all the way until today. The NRS era is the time where the games were taken at their most serious. Okay, maybe the games were never too serious. All the games have their own amount of goofiness and playfulness in their own unique way, all the way even during the game's start. I remember showing my friend one of the fatalities from this era, and he just started to laugh at them. While incredibly violent, some of them are just plain goofy, which is great. But what isn't great is the fact that I'm most likely going to get demonetized for it. So in my best efforts to counteract that, I'm going to be grayscaling the footage a bit and using characters that don't have red blood, like Reptile or Devora. Lastly, if there's any extra fatalities from the characters, I won't be ranking them. I'm going to be ranking the main fatalities that you get when you buy the game. If the character doesn't have 2 unique fatalities and they reuse one, then I will rank them, but if they have 2 unique ones, then it won't be counted for. This is less for the characters and more for me since I don't have to review or figure out where to put the classic fatalities. The first game in the series. Would you look at all that? Oh shit, it's the wrong game. Nearly 20 years after the first game came out, the reboot, usually called MK9, was the game that put the series on the map again. After several years of 3D games, the series goes back to its 2D roots, where people vastly prefer the game series to be. While I love the series, I can't say I'm not nostalgic for the older games in the series of that style. It continued the cinematic story trend that MK vs. DC Universe started, and it had the best looking fatalities in the series yet. These graphics are nice, bright, and colorful, giving you a good look at the gore here, which is great. With a long tower of challenges and a mode where you can select 2 characters, there's a good amount of stuff here for people to play with. But without further ado, let's look at some of the fatalities in MK9. Now this is where the fatalities get fairly long, so sit back, relax, and time to take in some good fatalities. Scorpion's first fatality shows him slicing the opponent's body and head off, then kicking the head off and slicing it down. It's got a good pace to it, it's got nice camera work, and the final slice is a nice touch. 8 out of 10. His second fatality is phenomenal. He drags the enemy's body to Netherrealm and lets the corpse hang from a separate portal. Now this fatality is sick, the kick is powerful and the final shot is amazing. 9 out of 10. Liu Kang's first fatality is just a basic punch that puts a hole in the opponent's chest. Nothing too great, it's way too simple. Even if this game was older, it'd be way too boring. 4 out of 10. His second fatality is a reference to the second game where he eats the body as a dragon. While it is a good one, it's definitely the worst out of all of them. The bite is too quick and lacks the impact, and the dragon doesn't even stay. I still like it, but the other 2 entries are much stronger. 7 out of 10. Kung Lao's first fatality is a hat slice where he removes the opponent's head and then slices it down the middle. A pretty good fatality that is being held up by the good camera work. 7 out of 10. Kung Lao's second fatality is absolutely brutal. He drags the opponent's legs through his spinning hat and slices them in half in ease. Absolutely devastating. 9 out of 10. Sub-Zero freezes the opponent's lower half, lifts up their body, and rips it in half. A bit of a simple one, but it's a nice callback to his first fatality without it being a direct reuse of it. 6 out of 10. In fact, his second fatality is also a lot like his first, but with a different twist. Removing the enemy's spine and skull, he freezes the opponent and bashes it with the skull. To me, this is much better than the first, and in terms of using his powers and it being a callback. 8 out of 10. Sindel's first fatality is her screaming into the opponent's ear and destroying the other half of their head. This one is really cool. I like how only one half of it is destroyed, leaving some unique gore. 8 out of 10. Her second fatality is pretty much the same thing, but the whole head explodes, so it's not as interesting. 4 out of 10. Kitana's first fatality is her doing some basic arm and head slices, nothing fancy or interesting. 4 out of 10. Her second fatality is her opening up her fan blades inside the opponent's body. Again, not super interesting, but a bit better than her first. 6 out of 10. Ermac's first fatality is him lifting the opponent up in the air, removing their arms and legs, and slamming the head on the ground. A pretty good fatality for Ermac that utilizes his powers well. 7 out of 10. Ermac's second fatality is so goofy for this game, but I kinda love it. He shrinks the opponent down and stomps on them, and wipes his boot off. A really funny fatality that is just so wacky that it's hard to hate. 8 out of 10. Reptile is back with a dope design. This is my favorite Anthro-esque look for him. They actually made him not look horrific with his mask off either. I mean, he does look like Voldemort, but he still looks dope to me. Either way, his first fatality features him spitting acid down the throat and then ripping out their stomach. While it is unique, both of these moves don't have any real relation to each other, and they're both way too separated. 5 out of 10. His second fatality is him turning invisible, slicing the opponent up, and then shooting an acid ball inside of them. It's a bit better than his first one, he uses his powers more properly, and the attacks have a better flow, even if the first hit doesn't really belong with the rest. 7 out of 10. Johnny Cage references not only one of his fatalities, but two with his move, and both don't really feel connected to each other at all. He punches their head off and then removes the upper half of their body. It just feels disjointed and the moves don't land all too well for me. 4 out of 10. The second fatality is much better. He chops the opponent's head in half and puts in one of his trophies in the makeshift trophy stand. Much better and goes with his character. 7 out of 10. For Jade's first fatality, she decapitates the opponent, and that's it, 1 out of 10. Her second fatality is her kicking them in the air, letting them land on a pole, and putting the head on top. It's not much better than the first, and it's way too basic. 4 out of 10. Melina's first fatality is her throwing size at the opponent and ripping their head off to eat it. This fatality feels like it's trying to do too much with the character. Like she has size, so she needs to throw them, but the character is alive, so she still rips off their face. But it's Melina, so she has to do something crazy like eat at their face. There's just no real flow. 4 out of 10. Her second fatality is a bit better. She throws size at their feet, picks up the body, and throws it behind her, letting the legs fall. An alright one that has a bit more focus. 6 out of 10. Cyrax's first fatality is him slicing the opponent's body up with an arm saw he has. Nothing too crazy, but the body after looks fun. 6 out of 10. The second fatality is him shooting a net at the opponent, slicing them up a million times as they fall over. Much better since it uses one of his actual moves to get the effect. 8 out of 10. Sector's first fatality is great. He shoots several missiles at the opponent and lets the camera get a good angle of each body part that's destroyed. Amazing to see. 8 out of 10. Sector's second fatality has him shooting a thing at the enemy's chest and having it turn them into a scarecrow, causing some great imagery. 9 out of 10. Noob's first fatality has him creating a portal and dragging the opponent into it. After closing it, he lets the opponent bleed out. This one is really good. It's got good pacing, and the last shot is great. 8 out of 10. The second fatality is contender for best in the series. He gets a clone to grab the opponent by the legs and rips them clean in half. This blew my mind when I first saw it. Not only does it look incredibly painful, but you have the added effect of knowing that the person is alive throughout the entire process. An actual brutal kill. 10 out of 10. Smoke's first fatality is him jabbing his fingers in the opponent's face and allowing the smoke to melt their entire skin off. A pretty brutal fatality that has some good camera work. 8 out of 10. Smoke's second fatality is very similar to the first. He passes through the enemy and lets their body fall apart. It's nice, but it's way too similar to the first one. 6 out of 10. Sonya's first fatality is a reference to the MK Gold fatality, and she just rips the opponent in half with her legs. Nothing too crazy. 6 out of 10. Sonya's second fatality is her ripping their head off with a wire. Well, it's not too crazy. I'm just happy that she finally has a fatality that isn't her kiss of death. 6 out of 10. Jax's first fatality is a combination of a few of his fatalities. He claps the opponent's head and then rips their arms off. It's alright, but the two moves are so disjointed from each other. Like, why did he rip their arms off after clearly killing them, then do nothing with them? Wouldn't it have been better if he clapped the head with the opponent's hands? 5 out of 10. Jax's second fatality is much better than the first. He punches the opponent down into the ground and then kicks their head off like it's a football. Much better, unique, and more goofy than his first. 9 out of 10. Kano's first fatality is alright. He rips the opponent's heart out through their chest and squishes it right in front of the opponent's eyes, being a callback to his first fatality. 6 out of 10. His second one is much similar. He rips their heart and head off and replaces the heart with the head. A fairly goofy one, but nothing crazy. 6 out of 10. Shang Tsung's first fatality is a reference to MK vs DC Universe for Joker's fatality. He turns into a clown and shoots the enemy in the head. Quite a funny one that poked fun at the last game of the series. 8 out of 10. Shang Tsung's second fatality is Liu Kang's fatality from Deception, where he goes into the enemy's body and rips their head off, then he leaves. While it sadly doesn't have the added benefit of having Shang Tsung's head on the opponent's body, it's still a fun fatality to look at. 7 out of 10. Raiden's first fatality is him blasting the opponent's arms and legs off and slamming their head on the ground. This makes me incredibly happy to see, because I was getting bored of Raiden's fatalities all being, then the enemy exploded. 7 out of 10. The second fatality is, then the enemy exploded. Yeah, there's a bit more to it, but my god, I'm done seeing people explode. Raiden, please think of something new. 5 out of 10. Baraka's first fatality is him slicing the opponent up with the last shot of him holding the opponent on the blade. Nothing too fancy about it. 6 out of 10. The second one is much better. He stabs the opponent with the arm blade and makes them spin while he removes bits and pieces from the enemy. It's really good. Baraka doesn't get too many unique fatalities like this. 8 out of 10. Cabal's first fatality has him kicking the opponent in the air and slicing them down the middle, leaving only the head fully intact. It's a pretty good one that has some good pacing. 7 out of 10. His second fatality has him slicing the body and letting them fall onto the blades. Another good one, but nothing too mind-blowing about it. 7 out of 10. Mortal Kombat 9 definitely did have some impressive fatalities. While there was some okay ones in there were definitely ones that blew me away while watching them, even over a decade after this game's release. It's really nice to see. I can't wait to see where the series goes from here. Here we have another issue, and it's a bit rough. Sector, Cyrax, and Smoke are sort of in this game. Let me explain. So this is the first game in the series to have variations of characters. When you pick a character on the character select screen, you get to choose which variation that you want, which gives you a different way of playing the same characters. It's really cool. Only problem is that there is a character named Triborg. Triborg is a cyborg character that has 4 characters within him: Smoked, Sector, Cyrax, and Cyber Sub-Zero. Here's my issue. Their fatalities are very clearly using all the variations together. I mean, one is legit called teamwork, for God's sake. So I'm going to do something drastic. Whatever score they get, I will give to all 3 of the characters, Smoke, Sector, and Cyrax. I could leave the character out altogether, but it's clear that this was the creators' clever way of getting all these characters playable in the game, which is nice to see. And since we don't see the cyborgs until Mortal Kombat 1, and those are just cameos, I feel fine doing this. If you don't like it, make your own video, I don't care. Liu Kang's first fatality is removing the trachea from the enemy's throat and putting it in their mouth. This is disgusting. This is legitimately gory. The other games were cute, but this one feels realistic in the sound it makes. It's absolutely gross and just unpleasant. 4 out of 10. His second fatality is better. He kicks the opponent in the air and rips them in half with his legs. It's a pretty good fatality that is way more pleasing on the eyes and ears than the first fatality. 6 out of 10. Sub-Zero's fatality has him breaking the opponent's body open to expose their spine, breaking the spine and ripping them in 2. This one is devastating to watch. It's got such a good sound effect on it too, and the last part is great. 10 out of 10. His second one is also brutal. He kicks the enemy onto a bed of spikes and presses them down on it, showing a spike going right through their eyeball. This is absolutely disgusting. But hey, at least it was cool to watch. 8 out of 10. Kitana's fatality has her throwing the fans at the enemy, expand, and the body parts being moved away. While the last shot is unique, it just doesn't land well. Something about the attacks just don't feel forceful at all, but it's still an interesting one. 6 out of 10. Her second fatality is her slicing the hands of her opponent off, jumping onto them and slicing their head in 2. It's an alright fatality, it's just not very interesting to watch. Not a lot of flair with it. 5 out of 10. So Sonya's Blade's fatality has her giving them a gas grenade in the mouth and having her drone slice their arms off and blast their head off. The first hit didn't have much to do with the final attack, and the last 2 hits didn't have the best pacing either. 4 out of 10. Her second fatality is her slicing the opponent's head off with a wire and the drone shooting at the head. This is a dope fatality. It's overkill, but it's done right, and has some style too. Her keeping the head is a bit creepy, but hey, different strokes for different folks. 8 out of 10. Jax's first fatality is him pushing the enemy's arms inside and then ripping their head in half. I know it says T-Rex, but man looks like a toilet. The cigar is a nice addition as well. A great fatality from Jax. 9 out of 10. His second fatality has him ripping the ribcage out of the sides and then stabbing it through their head and twisting their neck. While it is brutal with good pacing, all of the hits are just disjointed from each other. It feels like none of it goes together, like it's 3 different fatalities mixed into one. 4 out of 10. Kung Lao's first fatality is him throwing his hat down onto the ground and then forcing the enemy's head into it slowly. It's a really good one. There's a real struggle before the final blow, and the end result doesn't make me want to barf. 8 out of 10. His second fatality has him decapitating the opponent while slicing the body to give a unique looking corpse. It's pretty cool. It's got a unique pose, and its flow is very good. 7 out of 10. Melina's first fatality has her ripping the head off the opponent with her size and eating the skull. It's a great fatality. Even the ending shot where she throws the head on the ground like it's a bone with the meat plucked dry. The beginning too, like all she wanted was some food. 9 out of 10. Her second fatality follows a similar idea. She jumps onto the opponent and starts clawing at them and starts eating what's left of them. This is a great fatality. The pacing and the attacks are great. 10 out of 10. Okay, we should probably get Triborg out of the way. The first fatality has Cyrax slicing the opponent, Smoke shooting a spear through their heart, and the 2 cyborgs lifting them up as Sector punches them in half. A great use of all of their unique moves. 9 out of 10. Their second fatality is phenomenal. Much like the first 2, a spear goes into the enemy and the saw blade slices the opponent. Then he gets crushed by the human crushing machine, which can fit many more humans by the way, and spits out a meat cube of the character. This fatality is amazing. It has a great setup, a whole new object the team had to model, and the ending meat cube looks great. 10 out of 10. Raiden shocks the enemy's head until the eyes pop out and explodes the head while it's midair. While yes, it looks great, I can only take Raiden exploding something so many times. 5 out of 10. Raiden's second fatality has him shooting the legs off an opponent and then just electrocuting them. Okay, I know I've been complaining about him only exploding people because that's all of his fatalities really are, but I'm fine with them being that as long as there's something unique about it. Several of them throughout the series have been rating just electrocuting someone until they explode, and this one, when he does something a little bit unique, he now doesn't explode them. This is the one time where an exploded head would have been cool to see, but I feel like I got the setup to the joke without the punchline. 3 out of 10. Oh, we're back to peak character. Glad to see he's still in it after all this time, and still to go after all these years. His first fatality is him spitting acid on the face of the opponent and then ripping their head in two. It's alright, but these two moves don't really connect at all. They both happen and don't really correlate to each other. 5 out of 10. His second fatality has him spitting acid onto the floor and then eating the opponent's head as they descend into it. It's better with the two moves actually going with each other, and the ending shot of the character's hand is also very nice. 7 out of 10. Ermac's fatality is him lifting the opponent's body, contorting them, and then removing their guts. The ending shot is a little strange, and it doesn't help by Ermac's dopey-ass expression on his face, but it's still a unique fatality. 6 out of 10. Ermac's second fatality fares a bit better. He lifts the opponent's head off of their body and shoots it through their stomach. It's an interesting way to use his powers, only grabbing one thing at a time and then moving it through the opponent. I like it. 7 out of 10. Johnny Cage turns the enemy around, rips their body in half, and says,
"Here's Johnny."
It's a good reference that fits the character, and there's a bit of unique gore here as well. 8 out of 10. His second fatality just has him slamming the opponent's head onto the ground over and over again. It's extremely low effort and a fatality that pretty much anyone can do in the cast with ease. 3 out of 10. Kano's first fatality has him slicing the opponent's stomach open and blasting a hole right through their head with his laser eye. This one is great. The first shot of the guts hitting the floor is really good, and both moves correlate with each other since his movement is based off the first attack. Very solid one. 8 out of 10. His second one is much more basic. He throws his two knives into the opponent and they land on the knives. This is MK vs DC Universe tier, since this fatality was literally in MK vs DC Universe. 3 out of 10. Scorpion's first fatality has him shooting a fireball at the enemy, exposing their heart, and after the enemy stumbles, Scorpion slices the front of their face off. This is great, a nice gory effect and has good pacing. 9 out of 10. His second fatality is also great. He throws a spear at the enemy's head, removes it, and throws a sword at it so it gets stuck on a boulder he summoned. This is a great fatality that has a lot of style to it, like he put it there as a threat to everyone else. 10 out of 10. Mortal Kombat X has some great fatalities in it. You have a lot of characters that have unique gore with their moves, and a lot of them look devastating. Scorpion and Sub-Zero have great fatalities as always, and Triborg really stole the show with theirs. Now it's on to MK11. I spent $100 on the special edition of this game and got upset that Reptile wasn't in it and didn't play it. I'm a tourist in this game's community, see if I care. Mortal Kombat 11 left me a little bit disappointed because of the roster, and the fact that I didn't even get all the extra bonus content even though I got the special edition of the game. But it's whatever, at least we have some amazing fatalities to watch. If there is one good thing about this game, it's that the fatalities are some of the best in the game series, with several of the characters having good stuff to watch. Melina's first fatality has her spinning into the opponent's body and ripping it in two with her size, a pretty good one that uses her weapons nicely. 7 out of 10. Her second fatality is much better. She slices into the opponent's stomach, goes into the opponent, and grabs their face. Some great and unique gore from this one. 9 out of 10. Sintel's first fatality has her screaming the opponent's skin off along with her lower half, after she screams a blast at you, finishing the enemy off. It's a good use of her powers and plays on her usual trope. 7 out of 10. Her second fatality is also good. It has her forcing her hair into the enemy in unique ways until the last hit where it's just meat. A unique approach to her usual fatalities. 7 out of 10. Shang Tsung's first fatality shows him opening a portal beneath the opponent, forcing dead monks to grab several body parts and eventually their skeleton. It's a good fatality that uses his sorcery powers quite nicely. 7 out of 10. His second fatality has him spawning a Kataro inside the enemy's body, having him forcefully rip open the sides and arms off him to rip himself out. Another great one from Shang Tsung. 8 out of 10. Johnny Cage's first fatality has him grabbing the opponent's upper body and then using it as a stand-up special like it's a damn ventriloquist.
Ah, this hangover.
Too much fun at happy hour?
Oh, I got totally ripped.
This fatality is amazing, all down to the jokes and the ending bit with the tomato. 10 out of 10. His second fatality is also great. He's doing the classic triple uppercut, except the head doesn't get punched off and he gets angry and throws it at the screen, with the whole thing being played out like it's a failed shoot on set. It's phenomenal work. 10 out of 10. Sonya's first fatality has her throwing the enemy into the air and shooting the enemy several times until they get hit with helicopter blades. This one is really good, and it's finally nice to see the developers do something with their special forces training rather than a kiss of death. 8 out of 10. Our second one is absolutely brutal. This one shocked me when I first saw it years ago. You break their arm and nose, and after, force a little robot to fall from the sky, cut them in half, and then shoot them. The most brutal part about this fatality is, the second to last shot where we see him crawling away from the machine. It's legit scary to watch all of this dread. 9 out of 10. Jax's first fatality shows him strapping a bomb to the enemy and then blasting the enemy into his fist, ripping them in half. This one is great. The blast and the punch have a great satisfying feel and look to them. 9 out of 10. Jax's second fatality has him ripping off the opponent's arms, hitting their head off, and using the arm as a baseball bat with the baseball tune playing in the background. Absolutely amazing. Fatality has a lot of humor in it. 10 out of 10. Scorpion's first fatality shows him going through the opponent's body and leaving their spine, which doesn't make sense to begin with, then slices the enemy's head off, kicks it off, and shoots a spear right through it. It's got good posing and a nice pace, but the first hit doesn't really make sense and the rest of it is just overkill. Still, a nice fatality. 7 out of 10. His second fatality shows him shooting a spear into the opponent, then he goes down into Netherrealm and comes out the other side, forcing the chain through the opponent and slicing them down the middle. This one is great and uses his powers in a unique way with an amazing end shot. I legit want this on my wall. 10 out of 10. Noob's first fatality shows him poking his sides into some portals, stabbing at the enemy, and then ripping them to pieces. It's an okay fatality with pretty good pacing, but there's not much to it. 6 out of 10. His second fatality has him slicing the opponent in their stomach, then forcing a clone inside them to forcibly rip them in half. This one is much better than the last one and uses his clones in a fun way. 8 out of 10. Baraka grabs the opponent's face, then grabs the opponent's skull, and then grabs the brain with his arm blade, and eats it like it's corn. This one is pretty good and does a nice job of ramping the intensity up. 7 out of 10. His second fatality is him slicing the opponent up from their arms to their head to the head again. It's not really great, especially considering there's not much to it other than the basic slicing. This could have been done years ago. 4 out of 10. Raiden lifts the opponent in the air, rips their arms and legs off with electricity, and then shoots a small blast at them, just blowing them away. They don't even... Okay, I know what I just said about exploding them, but they really need to start thinking of something cool for Raiden. 4 out of 10. Raiden's second fatality has him slicing the arms and body of the opponent, then lifting them up and exploding the head in two. This one is pretty good, and in terms of Raiden's usual fatalities, is great. It does something unique with his powers, and it has some good pacing. 7 out of 10. Sub-Zero's first fatality has him freezing the opponent, slicing their head off with an ice battle axe, and then punches the frozen head. This one is great. Sub-Zero makes a new weapon just for this one hit, and the opponent has to watch the entire time. 8 out of 10. His second fatality is also great. He forces the opponent to fall onto an ice warrior, rips their head off via spine, and then forces the head onto the spear. A good take on an old classic that has some great pacing as well. 8 out of 10. Kano's first fatality has him breaking a bottle inside the opponent's neck and dancing with them. People are going to hate me, but I think this one is alright. It's good, but I hear people say they love this fatality, but it doesn't even do that much for me. 6 out of 10. His second fatality is pretty much garbage, to be honest. He just headsbutt the opponent several times until their head explodes. Something literally anyone can do. 2 out of 10. Cabal's first fatality is him grabbing the opponent with his hook swords, dragging them onto the ground, and then throwing them, slicing them in half. This one is amazing, from the first hit to the last slice, and he uses his powers in a great way. 10 out of 10. Cabal's second fatality has him using the hook swords on the opponent's legs, stomach, and head, and slicing their body up. This one is pretty good as well, and he uses his hook swords nicely. 7 out of 10. Liu Kang punches the enemy a whole bunch, and then explodes them with a punch. It's mid, nothing too exciting about any of it. 4 out of 10. His second fatality is almost as bad. It's a reference to his first fatality, and after he just uses nunchucks to break some loose body parts. Another boring one. 5 out of 10. Kitana's first fatality shows her putting a fan blade in the enemy's stomach, and then spinning, removing body parts inside. It's unique, but nothing really special or eye-catching. 5 out of 10. Her second fatality fares a bit better though. She uses her fans to slice the opponent in two, and then kicks one into the opponent's head. It's simple, but it's got good pacing and a nice kick to it. 6 out of 10. Kung Lao's first fatality has him slicing the opponent's head off, then the body and head in half right after. It's a pretty fun fatality, and the ending shot with the hat going through the brain is also neat. 7 out of 10. Kung Lao's second fatality is great. He grabs the opponent and spins them around to slice the opponent's body parts off, and then throws the enemy onto the hat and slices them in half. Really fun fatality from Kung Lao. 8 out of 10. Jade's first fatality is her slicing the opponent with her staff and then stabbing through the opponent's head. Fairly boring fatality coming from Jade. 4 out of 10. Her second fatality is her forcing the staff through the opponent's eye and then letting the opponent spit on the staff. It's another mid-fatality and it's not super interesting. 4 out of 10. The fatalities in Mortal Kombat 11 are some of the best in the entire series. You have characters like Johnny Cage who have phenomenal fatalities, along with Jax, Sub-Zero, Cabal, and Scorpion. A lot of love went into these fatalities and it really shows. And with this, we move on to our final game. Mortal Kombat 1. The game that started... What do you mean it's the second reboot in my lifetime? Mortal Kombat 1 is the newest entry into the series, so new that we're still waiting for characters to release for it. This game is wildly successful, has a ton of characters that people are happy about, and amazing gameplay that people are still talking about. Plus, not only do we get a wide selection of characters to choose from, there's also a huge list of cameo characters to pick that assist you in battle with a few of their own moves. The second list of characters also gets their own set of fatalities, which is amazing. Plus, with a cinematic story that I found great, I was very pleased with this game this time around. And can I say, these graphics are absolutely stunning. I don't even want to play this game, I just want to look at it. Like, it looks beautiful, and with that comes a bunch of new fatalities to watch. And before we start, I just want to say, this is going to be my first time watching most of these fatalities as well. I have a personal rule when it comes to these games. I'm not allowed to watch any of the fatalities unless it is for myself in game, whether I do it to the opponent or the opponent does it to me. I'm wicked excited to see the rest that I haven't seen yet. Kitana's first fatality is her lifting the enemy up in the air and spinning the fans on the top and bottom of the opponent, grinding them down. This one is honestly great. They finally found a cool way to use Kitana's fans. 8 out of 10. Her second fatality is another kiss of death, but this one plays out a bit different. She kisses them and their body disintegrates. While it's still the same fatality, it does have a new look to it and the ending body is great. 8 out of 10. Cyrax's fatality is him blowing up the earth again. It's funny, the game says a different character won when Cyrax literally killed everyone on the planet. 8 out of 10. Melina's first fatality is her stabbing size into the opponent's head, twisting it around and eating the opponent's entire skull. This one is crazy. It goes beyond eating, you can hear every crunch. 9 out of 10. Her second fatality is a bit more simple. She stabs Sais into the opponent's head and slowly breaks their neck and rips it off. It's a simple one, but a new take on an old fatality. 7 out of 10. Kano's fatality is a heart rip. A fine fatality, but there's not a whole lot you could do with it. 6 out of 10. Smoke's first fatality shows him slicing the opponent's arms off and shoving a grenade in the enemy's mouth and having it explode. It's got good cinematography, but it's just a bunch of basic attacks and not much more. 6 out of 10. His second fatality is a bit better, but it's also just basic attacking. He goes invisible and slices the opponent several times and then kicks the body off. A bit better with the invincibility, but still not anything crazy. 7 out of 10. Sonya Blade's fatality is her Kiss of Death fatality. It's another fine one. 6 out of 10. Scorpion's first fatality has him shooting 2 spears through the opponent's chest, then into their eyes, removing their head through their body. This one is great. It's got great pacing, satisfying moves, and a great ending shot. 9 out of 10. His second one is crazy though. He summons some clones, which was a reference to his other fatality from Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and has his original skull fatality as well. After getting attacked several times by the clones, Scorpion pulls the opponent in and kicks the skeleton out of their body. Amazing. 10 out of 10. His cameo fatality is the skull fatality. 6 out of 10. Reptile's back with a dope human form and a pretty cool monster form as well. It's not my favorite of the designs, the lips are a bit off-putting to me, but it looks cool everywhere else. Should have been peak though. His first fatality shows him going invisible and eating the enemy and swallowing them, only after to vomit them back up and crush their head. It's a good fatality, but I feel like it would have been way better if the enemy fully dissolved in the acid instead of the quick head crush. It makes the two moves feel more disjointed than they are. Still good though. 8 out of 10. Reptile's second fatality is also really good. He wraps his tongue around the opponent's neck and they struggle to rip it off, but the acid goes right through their hands. After that, he eats the head. This one is a play off the classic fatality as well, and I like the added effect of dissolving the opponent's hands. 8 out of 10. Sector's fatality is his human crushing machine fatality. 7 out of 10. Sub-Zero's first fatality has him throwing an ice boomerang through the opponent, him kicking the opponent around only for the boomerang to come back and hit the opponent in between the eyes. This one is great, does something unique with the character's powers, and the final hit with the body falling looks great. Amazing. 9 out of 10. His second fatality is also really good. He creates an ice wall and bashes their head into it. I love the shot where it just shows the front of the skull and the brain. The ending is also really good, with the whole thing exploding. 7 out of 10. His cameo fatality is his spine rip fatality. 7 out of 10. Jax's fatality is his fatality where it grows larger and steps on the opponent. 6 out of 10. Baraka's first fatality has him shooting his arm blades through the opponent's eyes and then slicing the body in half. An alright fatality, nothing too boundary pushing. 6 out of 10. His second fatality is much better. It has him slicing the opponent, then kicking them away, making their intestines fly out. Then somehow, he makes them stay in the air as he cooks the opponent for him and his friends. Absolutely amazing fatality, and shows that Baraka cares about his friends. 9 out of 10. Sindel's first fatality has her ripping the opponent's arms off with her hair and then standing the opponent up with it. Then asks,
"Who's your queen?"
before ripping their spine and skull. So I sort of like it. It's way too tryhard when she says the line, "Who's your queen?" but it's nothing terrible. 6 out of 10. Her second fatality is much better. She starts floating around the opponent while screaming. Being so loud, it causes the enemy's eyes to pop out of their own head. Then she finished the animation with another blast causing their body to explode, leaving only a skeleton. This one is great, an amazing take on an old classic. 9 out of 10. Raiden's first fatality is him throwing the enemy into the air, blasting them with lightning, and then ripping the body in two, only to slam the two parts in together. While I do really like this fatality, and I'm happy that he isn't just doing a basic explosion, I feel like the last few hits do feel a bit disjointed with how much happens at the end. Still, a great fatality. 8 out of 10. His second one shows him electrocuting the enemy so much that he causes their skin to melt off, then the meat, and then blasts right through their skeleton. A fun fatality with some nice use of his powers. 7 out of 10. Liu Kang's first fatality shows him spawning in two dragons to hold the opponent in the air while he jumps up and slams the enemy's head down into themselves, splitting them down the middle. This one is great. The shot of the head going through the body is excellent, and it gives everything much more detail and power. 10 out of 10. His second fatality has him opening up a black hole behind the opponent and causing them to melt into it slowly. This one is insane to watch. It's absolutely ruthless for a once non-violent monk. I love this one. 10 out of 10. Johnny Cage's first fatality has him pulling out his phone and showing off to his fans over a stream. Then he slams the opponent's head onto the ground, lifts him up, and makes the enemy look like a victim of an MRI scan. This one is great. Another amazing detail is the opponent's name on the plaque. Very nice. 9 out of 10. His second fatality has him kicking the opponent into the window of a car and then opening it up. Afterwards, he slams the door down to slice the opponent in half and has the car drive away while the opponent is still stuck in it. This one is great. It shows off Johnny's personality and wealth off the best and is stylish to hell and back. 10 out of 10. Kung Lao's first fatality is just a bunch of slicing. Uses the hat nicely, but it's just a bunch of basic attacking. 5 out of 10. His second fatality serves much better. He throws the hat up in the air, grabs the opponent's arms, goes over them, and then has the hat slice them down the middle, and afterwards tears them in half. It's much better than the first one. 7 out of 10. His cameo fatality is his MK2 slice fatality. 6 out of 10. Shang Tsung's first fatality is him slicing the opponent's neck and shoving a potion down their throat. As it slowly melts the insides, he opens up their stomach and the enemy character melts further from there. A pretty good one, showing off his use of potions from the story and the animation. 7 out of 10. His second fatality is him putting the opponent on a table and cutting them open. Then after, he pours a potion inside them and a snake comes out and eats their brain. This one is amazing. I love the snake that comes out of them, and I love the ending shot as well. 10 out of 10. And with that, the fatalities in Mortal Kombat 1 are some of the best in the series. Some of them blowing my mind with what the developers were able to think of. Scorpion and Sub-Zero having great fatalities, Raiden finally having some unique stuff for his character, and Liu Kang stealing the show with his two amazing fatalities. Now that all the games have been reviewed, it's time to see where we stand. In 13th place, we have Kano with 8 points. 12th place with Jade and Sonya Blade at 9. 11th place with Raiden at 9.5 points. 10th place with Katana with 10 points. 9th with Johnny Cage at 10.5 points. 8th place with Baraka at 11 points. 7th place has Jax, Liu Kang, and Noob Saibot with 11.5 points. 6th place has Ermac, Reptile, and Smoke with 12. 5th has Mileena, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero with 12.5 points. 4th place has Kung Lao, Shang Tsung with 13 points. 3rd place has Cyrax with 13.5 points. 2nd has Sindel and Sector with 14 points, and 1st place goes to Cabal with 15 points. I am quite stunned that it wasn't Scorpion or Sub-Zero stealing the show in this. They were in the most games and their fatalities are usually great, but the fact that Cabal had a smaller amount of entries while still maintaining good quality throughout their animations made them steal the show. That's quite impressive. Though showing up in a fewer amount of games probably helped Cabal more than anything. Having less of a chance to mess up the fatalities and appearing in a few of the new games for better animation definitely did secure Cabal the top spot. though we still had some great fatalities, let's not forget about that. Now that we're done ranking the fatalities, I have to say thank you for watching. This took a lot out of me to make since I had to go through several games to do this, though I do plan on making other content for the MK series, but time will tell when I can do that. Now that I'm done making this video, I'm gonna go play Mortal Kombat 1, which I have a lot more free time to do since this video is now finished. See you later!